The day we buried my husband, his brother showed up to the reception with a yellow legal pad. Not flowers, not a casserole. A legal pad, folded in half, tucked under his arm like he was headed to a meeting. I watched him from across the kitchen, still in my black dress, still holding the half-eaten dinner roll someone had pressed into my hand, and I thought, he's been waiting for this. My brother-in-law set his coffee cup down on my grandmother's lace tablecloth without a coaster and looked at me with the kind of sympathy that has math behind it. "Bettina," he said, "we should talk about the garage." I had stood at a graveside for 2 hours in November wind. My feet ached. My sister-in-law had cried loudly through the entire service, which I understand is normal. But I had not cried at all, and several people had noticed and said things about it, in quiet voices that I was clearly meant to hear. Shock, probably. She must be in shock. I wasn't in shock, I just wasn't surprised. 41 years of marriage teaches you the shape of a man. And the shape of mine had a locked garage at the center of it. "Not today," I told Burton. He nodded like he agreed, but his eyes didn't change. The garage had been padlocked since 1987. That's the year Stuart told me it was his workspace, his private space, the one place in our life that belonged only to him. He was a contractor then, and it made a kind of sense. Tools, blueprints, things I didn't understand and didn't need to. I accepted that. Then he retired in 2009, and the lock stayed. I asked about it once. Just once. We were sitting on the back porch, and I'd noticed the orange glow through that one high window, and I said, casual as I could, "What do you work on in there anyway?" He looked at me over his reading glasses. "You'd find it boring." That was the whole answer. You'd find it boring. Not, "Let me show you." Not, "Come in sometime." Just a sentence that sounded like an invitation but wasn't. Over the years, I stopped noticing the garage the way you stop noticing a scar. It became part of the landscape of us. The off-limits room, the one door I never touched. I didn't dwell on it. I had my own rhythms, my garden, my book club, my Tuesday calls with my friend Lavinia, who lived 3 states away and always made me laugh for exactly the amount of time I needed. My daughter came by after the funeral guests left. She stayed until 9, washed the dishes I couldn't face, and kissed my forehead on her way out like I was the child and she was the mother. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed we'd shared for 4 decades and listened to the house settle, and at some point past midnight, I realized I was staring at the ceiling, thinking about the garage. Not grief, just the garage. I called a locksmith 3 days later. I didn't tell my daughter. I didn't call Burton back. I found a name online, a company out of Dayton, and a man arrived at 9:15 on a Tuesday morning, polite and quick, and had the padlock off in under 10 minutes. "Old master lock," he said. "These don't give up easy." The door swung in. The smell was the first thing. Old wood, motor oil, something chemical underneath, paint thinner, maybe, or sealant. The kind of smell that means a man has been in a space for a long time. I stood in the doorway and let my eyes adjust. It was organized. That's what surprised me first. I'd expected chaos, decades of accumulated junk. But the shelves along the walls were neat, labeled, the floor swept clean. A long workbench ran the length of the back wall, with a single lamp and a stool in front of it. To the left, a metal filing cabinet, the old kind, olive green, 4 drawers, with its own small padlock hanging from the handle. To the right, a shelf with plastic storage bins labeled in his handwriting, receipts, correspondence. I didn't go further, not that first day. The filing cabinet took another call to the locksmith. He came back that Thursday, no questions, and I appreciated that about him. Inside the top drawer, folders, his handwriting on every tab, taxes, medical, insurance, normal enough. But in the second drawer pushed toward the back, a folder with no label, just a rubber band around it. I opened it at the workbench under the lamp. Bank statements. Not for our joint account, not for anything I recognized. An account at a bank we'd never used, opened in 1988. 33 years of statements, bundled by year. The deposits were regular. Every month, like a mortgage payment, money moved out of this account into a wire transfer. The same routing number, year after year, sometimes more in December, sometimes a little extra in May. In 33 years, the total transferred out was, by my rough count, close to $260,000. I sat with that number for a long time. Then I looked at the third drawer. The box was cardboard, plain, sealed with tape that had gone brittle and yellowed. Inside, photographs. A woman, maybe in her late 20s in the early ones, dark-haired, pretty in a quiet way, standing in front of a car I didn't recognize. Then the same woman at a kitchen table, at a beach, sitting in a hospital bed holding a newborn. More photos as the years went on. The baby became a toddler. The toddler became a gap-toothed girl in a school uniform. The girl became a teenager with her mother's dark hair, then a young woman in a graduation cap, then a woman, maybe 30, standing in what looked like a law office. Beneath the photos, birthday cards, dozens of them, bundled with rubber bands. I opened one from 1995. Inside, in a child's handwriting, round and careful, "Happy birthday, Daddy, I love you to the moon." And beneath that, in different handwriting, "We're so proud of you. Come soon, your girls miss you." Your girls. I put the card down very carefully on the workbench. I pressed my palms flat against the wood. The lamp hummed. Outside, a car passed on the street. My husband had a daughter. For 41 years, he had a daughter, and I had never known her name. I didn't call anyone that night. I went inside, made a pot of tea I didn't drink, and sat at the kitchen table until dark. Here is what I kept turning over. I am not a suspicious person. I have never been the kind of woman who checks her husband's phone or reads his mail. I trusted because I thought that was what love looked like. And Stuart had always seemed straightforward to me. Quiet, sometimes cold, sometimes dismissive, but not deceptive. Or so I had thought. Now I was rethinking 33 years of money I never managed because he told me I worried unnecessarily about finances. Every appointment he drove me to because it was easier. Every time he answered for me at the doctor's office. She gets confused sometimes. She's been tired lately. While I sat beside him and nodded along because I thought agreeing was the same as being agreeable. How many things had I believed simply because he said them, and I never pushed back? I found the phone on the fourth day. It was taped to the underside of the workbench. An old flip phone, the kind that stopped being made a decade ago. I almost missed it. I was running my hand along the wood and my fingers found the edge of the tape. I peeled it free, opened it. The battery was long dead, but I had a universal charger in the kitchen drawer. And 45 minutes later, the phone powered on. 17 text messages. The last one sent 2 days after my husband died. I read them from the most recent backward. The final message said, "I heard. I've been crying since yesterday. I know we aren't supposed to talk when you're home, but I didn't know who else to tell. Eloise is devastated. She keeps saying she never got to tell him she passed the bar. Call me if you can. Eloise." I now had a name. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because people have asked, and the answer is more complicated than they expect. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was something quieter and, in its own way, worse. I felt like a piece of furniture, something arranged in a room to look like part of the picture without anyone particularly caring whether it was comfortable or had feelings or minded being moved. I had been the wife. She had been the love. And Eloise had been the daughter, the real one, the one he drove to see during those long weekends visiting clients, the one whose bar passage he'd known about and hadn't lived to celebrate. I sat in the garage until the lamp was the only light. Then I called Lavinia. She answered on the second ring the way she always does, like she's been waiting, like she has nothing more urgent in the world than hearing from me. I told her everything. I didn't cry while I told it. She did. When I finished, she said, "Bettina, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "Okay." "Did you know any of it? Even a whisper?" "No," I said, "not a whisper." She exhaled. "Then he was very good at it. And you were not weak. Do you hear me? You were not weak." I had not realized until she said it that I needed someone to say it. Burton called the following Monday. He'd been leaving voicemails every few days, vague, oily messages about settling the estate and things that needed handling. But this time I picked up. "Bettina," he said, "I've been trying to reach you." "I know." A pause. "I want to come over. There are documents we need to go through." Stuart was very specific about how he wanted things handled. "I'm sure he was," I said. Another pause. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Burton. I've been in the garage." The silence that followed was not the silence of surprise. It was the silence of someone calculating. "Ah," he said finally. "Just come by Thursday," I told him. "Bring whatever documents you have." I hung up before he could say anything else. That afternoon, I called an attorney, a woman my neighbor had used for her own estate matter. Someone she said was sharp and didn't waste words. Her name was Ms. Holt, and she saw me the next day. I brought the bank statements, the photographs, the birthday cards, and the printouts I'd made of the text messages. I laid them on her desk in order. She read through them without speaking. When she finished, she folded her hands on top of the stack. "Tell me about the will," she said. I had the will too. I'd found it in the filing cabinet's bottom drawer, labeled simply estate, and I'd been working to understand it. Miss Holt helped me see it clearly. The structure was deceptively clean, she explained. On the surface, I was provided for the house, a monthly allowance, health care. But every significant financial decision was routed through Burton, named executor with broad discretionary powers. Any asset sale, any investment, any withdrawal above a threshold I hadn't even been told existed, all required his approval. "He built it so you'd be kept," Ms. Holt said, "but not in control." I sat with the word kept. "And the money?" I asked, "the transfers?" She tapped the statements. "This went to a separate trust. If that trust named biological heirs, they may have a legitimate claim. But so might you, depending on how the marital estate was structured." She looked at me steadily. "The question is, what do you want?" I thought about Eloise, 33 years old, a newly barred attorney, grieving a father she'd known only in secret her whole life. "I want the full picture first," I said. "Before anyone makes any decisions, I want to know who she is." Burton arrived Thursday with a briefcase and his own attorney, which told me everything about Thursday. I met them at the door and did not invite the attorney inside. Burton looked startled. His lawyer, a soft-spoken man in his 50s, said something about it being routine. I said I had my own counsel and we'd be in touch. Then I looked at Burton directly and said, "I found the filing cabinet." He went very still. "I know about the account," I said. "I know about the trust. I know about the woman and her daughter." I kept my voice level. Not cold, not angry, just clear. "I want you to know that I know, so we can stop pretending this is a simple matter." Burton opened his mouth. "I'm not finished," I said. "You were going to manage my money for the rest of my life, weren't you? You'd be the gatekeeper, and I'd be the woman who never asked questions. That was the arrangement. Stuart wanted to make sure you were taken care of. He wanted to make sure I didn't find out," I said. "Those are different things." His lawyer cleared his throat. Burton looked at the welcome mat. "I'd like you to leave now," I said. They left. I stood in the doorway until their car rounded the corner. Then I went inside and called Ms. Holt and told her we were moving forward. It took 3 weeks to get the full picture. Ms. Holt worked with a researcher, and what came back was this. The woman had been my husband's girlfriend before we married, before I'd even met him. She'd gotten pregnant. He'd told her he couldn't leave the life he'd built but would take care of them. She'd believed him, or she'd resigned herself to it, which isn't quite the same thing. She'd raised Eloise alone, with his financial support and his occasional presence, and she was now 64 years old and had long since moved on from whatever she'd once felt for him. She had, in her own way, been managed too. When Eloise contacted me, she reached out through Ms. Holt, a careful and formal email. I wasn't surprised. I read it at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning with the windows cracked and cold November air coming through. She said she had only recently learned about me. She said she was sorry. She said she wanted no part of a dispute over the estate and had already signed documents declining the trust her father had set up. She said she had passed the bar in September and wished she'd had the chance to tell him. I read that last line 4 times. Then I wrote back. I told her I was glad she had her degree. I told her I didn't blame her for a single thing. I told her that if she ever wanted to talk, I was a woman who had recently learned to leave doors open. She wrote back 2 hours later. "We've spoken on the phone 3 times now. She has her mother's dark hair. I've seen pictures. And her father's stubborn precision in the way she builds a sentence. She is, despite everything, a decent person. That's not his doing. That's her mother's and her own." The hearing was a formality by the time it came. Miss Holt had built the case methodically. The undisclosed account, the will's restriction clauses, Burton's pattern of contact before and after Stewart's death that suggested he'd known about the arrangement for years. The judge dissolved the executor arrangement and returned full control of the marital estate to me. Burton didn't come to the hearing. He sent his lawyer, who sat quietly and said very little. Afterward, Miss Holt walked with me to the parking lot and said, "You held up well in there." "I've been practicing," I said. She smiled. "What are you going to do first?" I'd already decided I was going to clean out the garage. Not as a gesture, not as symbolism, just practically. It was a good space, dry, well-built, with decent light when you opened it up. I'd been thinking about converting it into a studio for the painting I'd set aside 20 years ago, when Stewart said it was a waste of time, that I had no real eye for it, that the smell of paint gave him a headache. I drive past art supply stores now the way other people drive past bakeries, with specific, deliberate want. My granddaughter helped me carry the last of the boxes out on a Saturday in early December. She's 16, all sharp angles and opinions, and she had no patience for sentiment that morning. She wanted the work done efficiently and made that clear. We worked mostly in silence, which suited me fine. We found one more thing in the back of the third drawer, tucked behind where the folders had been. An envelope with my name on it. Just my first name. Bettina, in his handwriting, which I know as well as my own. I opened it in the garage with my granddaughter standing beside me, because by that point I had decided there were no more secrets worth keeping. Inside was a single index card, 5 sentences printed small. "I know you've always been smarter than I let you believe." I told myself I was protecting everyone. I don't think that's true anymore. I'm sorry, I should have been braver. My granddaughter read it over my shoulder. She didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "He knew." "Yes," I said. "That makes it worse." "Yes," I said again. "It does." I folded the card and held it for a long moment, standing in that clean-swept concrete space that smelled of old motor oil, and finally winter air. Then I put it in my coat pocket, not to keep as a wound, not to wave as evidence. Just because I had spent 41 years receiving very little from that man, and an almost apology felt like something I was allowed to take. We carried the last box to the curb together, my granddaughter and I, and when we turned to go back inside, I left the garage door standing open. I want the light to come through. I want to see what I can build in the space where his secrets used to live. I've been thinking about color, what to put on the walls, what to set on that long workbench where he used to sit alone. I have time now. I have the house. I have my name on every document I've signed since November, and no one else's signature required. I am 67 years old, and I am starting from the beginning, which sounds like a tragedy and is not one. It's the most awake I've felt in years.